all over the place.
Yeah, likewise. It's nice to finally meet you here virtually. So it's pretty cool.
Totally.
Hey, Devin.
You did, Juan?
Good to see you, man.
I'm in Houston.
You're in Houston as well. Hey, Devin.
Hey, Tamar, how are you? Nice to see you.
As well.
I am putting a few things technology-wise up real quick and getting my questions for this panel. Let me do this. We share it live on Facebook, but it's only in the closed group. So just for making sure no matter where anybody is, they have no excuse not to be able to watch, right?
That's it.
So let me type in this up real quick. 3, 2. And all right, we should be good. So I want to first start us off and have you guys do a little bit of an introduction, okay? So while somebody else is speaking, you can just turn your mic off, if you will. Most of you look like you're not in a loud, crazy room. So as long as you're not in a loud, crazy room, you're perfectly fine. But if you got things happening in the background or something happens, just mute it or whatever. But yeah, you should be fine otherwise. And I'm going to go in order first of how it's listed on the schedule. So I'm going to have Juan get us started, and then we'll go to Tamar, Devin, and then Julie. And then I'll mix it up with the questions as we're going throughout. But those of you who are watching, if you have questions throughout, make sure you go ahead and type them into the Q&A box. So type them into the Q&A box, and any of the questions that you have, we'll do our best to open it up to the panelists, time permitting. So this one goes from 12:30 to 1:45, so it's a 75-minute panel. Gives us plenty of time to be able to ask as many questions as possible and cover a lot of content. So I've been to some events before, and you have a panel that gets up on stage and they have like 20 minutes. And you have like 5 people, and it's like, and I've been on the stage before, and I've been one of those panelists going, I don't want to hog the stage, or I don't know if I have enough time to cover what we need to cover. So I'm glad that you guys took the time to be able to be here with us. So I'm going to turn it over to Juan, and I want you to tell us briefly first. So just talk briefly about your story and your journey as a W-2 employee to a full-time apartment investor, and what I like to call the Reader's Digest version. So if you don't know what the Reader's Digest version, it's basically the short story. So I was told recently that if I use the words Reader's Digest, that some people might not know what that is. So I guess that shows my age a little bit, but I'm only 35, so I'm not that old. So I'm going to turn it over to Juan, have you get us started, and talk about your journey from W-2 employee to full-time apartment investor. And then when you're done, I'm going to have you basically, say, I'm going to turn it over to Tamar. And then Tamar's going to share hers. And then Tamar, when you're done, you can say, I'm going to turn it over to Devin. And Devin, when you're done, you can say, I'm going to turn it over to Julie. So just remember who you're turning it over to. And then we'll get to the other questions as we go throughout.
Sounds like a plan. Can everybody hear me pretty good? Good? Okay, awesome. So, hey, everybody, I'm Juan Vargas. So I guess I'll do a quick story. Like you said, for me, coming out of high school, my parents struggled financially. So I, went to work instead of going to college right then and there. And, a couple of years later, I felt like I was too old to go back to college, and I really wasn't, obviously. So I went instead to a technical school. And, because it was quick, it was easy. I worked good with my hands, from what my dad taught me. And so I did that, and I went to a technical school. And, shortly after that, I found myself working with BMW. I was working on cars. That's what I was. I was a technician. I became good at that. I did that for several years, and, I was a pro at that. I was, one of the best techs there. I was even nationally recognized. But one of the things about that is it's a skill set job. And I found myself, hitting a ceiling. And as far as time and as far as income, I was doing good, but I kept hitting the ceiling, and it's it was draining, and I had a family. I had three boys, so for me it was about family, and so I wanted to make something happen, for them. So I started looking into real estate, and because it was something that kept popping up as passive income, and so I started off with a couple of single family homes, and then from there, I was vacant on a single family home and so I was like, man, this sucks. I'm paying for everything. I gotta do something else about this, because I can't have, 56 and, I'm going to be 60 years old, if I stay here and, cash flow a couple $100 a month or whatever. So I was like, man, I got to do something about it. So, for me, I thought about it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do multifamily. This just makes too much sense. I'm going to do multifamily and I'm not looking back. And that's what I did. I reached out to brokers that, they didn't give me the time of the day. So I took matters in my own hands and I started doing direct mail, came across the 32 unit. I took it down and that was my start to multifamily, so I've, co-GP'd, I've, invested passively and, here I am today. So it definitely could be done. So, I'm here to tell you, I'm not really smart guy, but I had the initiative and I had the will to do it. If I can do it, if a BMW technician can do it, then anybody, you guys, can do it. So I'm here to tell you guys, anybody can do it. So that's it.
I think that means you're handing it over to me.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, everyone. I'm Tamar, and super excited to be here and share my story with y'all. So I've been investing in multifamily for 2 years now, and leading up to doing this full time, I was in small business and startups for about 20 years. The 5 years prior to me leaving the corporate world, I was in the executive suite for a company on Wall Street that we did regulatory change management in the world's largest financial institutions. And then I was the COO of one of the largest real estate brokerages in Washington State and helped take them through a giant merger in that process. And throughout that all, about 4 years before I left, I knew that I just wanted to start my own company. And I didn't know what it was. We had been investing in single family for a while. And essentially, I just said that I wanted to build an empire for us to live off of. And so we started buying houses on auction. Fast forward, I knew that we weren't going to reach our goals fast enough. So that was part of me leaving and starting into multifamily. The other part of it was in helping others grow their businesses for so long, I knew that I could do it on my own. And so it wasn't something where I was like, okay, we have enough passive income that we built up that I can leave my job. It was just that I felt like I needed to take a leap of faith because I knew that if I focused 100% on what I wanted to focus on, it would blow up in a good way. And then I always remember this conversation that I had with myself one day when I was driving down the freeway. I was like, I'm done being the CEO of somebody else's dreams. I want to be the CEO of my own dreams. And that has really resonated with me and resonated with a lot of other people that I've stuck with, especially the entrepreneurial type, right? Just that those of us that feel like we can really go after something and we put our whole heart and soul into it. And so, here I am 2 years later. I started a syndication business and I syndicated 4 apartment complexes within the first 14 months, which I consider to be no small feat, but it's been a blast. And so that's my Reader's Digest version of where I'm at right now. Handing it over to you, Devin.
Awesome. Thanks, Tamar. Quick shout out to Dan Hanford. I didn't get on a plane today. I had a little drive and I'm not sleeping in a hotel tonight and lots of other good things that we're all benefiting from. So hats off for putting this together, man. This is a great concept and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. I was in corporate America for about a decade. I got out of college, got married, shortly after my first son was born, and I have 3 children now and have been married for 10 years. And so I felt inclined to go out and climb the corporate ladder. And the first company I worked for was a $1 billion tech company here in San Antonio, Texas, where I live. And it was a great run for a couple of years. I was young and really excited. And the shine started to wear off after a couple of years, just working long hours and kind of struggling to advance as fast as I wanted to. I was advancing, but my goals are always bigger in terms of the paycheck. And so I was chasing that pretty hard for a couple of years. Finally, I decided that this company I was at wasn't working. I was going to go see what else was out there after a number of years. So I interviewed and moved to another company and got a pay raise and a little better title. But a couple of months of the new job, I realized, wait a minute, it wasn't the company that was the problem. It was this map that I have that was the problem. And I realized after that second corporate job that I could bounce around all I wanted, but it wasn't going to fix the problem that my income was tied to my time kind of a 1-to-1 ratio. And so that got me into looking for passive income. And over the years, eventually I found real estate and bought my first little single family rental house. And that was a very successful venture. I was able to buy it, fix it, and then refinance out just about all my money. And that's when a light bulb went off for me. I said, wow, I can really start buying these assets, own them, cash flow them, tax advantages, et cetera, not really have much money in it. So I kind of went crazy with single family and built a portfolio of 10 houses and started doing that. But all the while I was in a group where there were multifamily investors and I knew I wanted to end up there. So my transition to full-time multifamily was very deliberate. It took about 2.5 years, and I actually changed jobs one more time very deliberately for a corporate job that was less pay, less stress, and less expectation, almost like what you would call like a reverse or lateral move in terms of the corporate ladder. And people around me are scratching their heads going, what are you doing? You know, you don't have a nice title. You don't have the paycheck that you had. But I put my head down. I didn't say a word about what I was doing on the side. And I would meet people at Starbucks to close deals and build up this single family kind of portfolio. And the goal for me was to build enough cash flow for my single family and my first small multifamily to replace my corporate income. And as soon as I did that, I gave myself permission to quit my corporate job. And since then, you know, I really was looking at the opportunity cost. What is it costing me 40, 50 hours a week at this corporate job that's really just kind of paying my bills? I don't really enjoy it. What does that cost me in terms of what I'm giving up, in terms of how I could grow as an entrepreneur, in terms of going to conferences, in terms of studying, learning, partnering, doing things, all the things that we do as full-time entrepreneurs. And so I had a hunch that it was costing me a lot to trade my time for the corporate job. And so I left my corporate job in mid-2015, and things have just exploded since then because of my ability to focus on my multifamily business. So that's the kind of Reader's Digest version. I'll hand it over to Julie.
Thanks, Devin. Hey, everyone. I'm Julie Lamb. I'm super excited to be here. Also want to thank Dan for inviting us to do this virtual conference. It's pretty cool to not have to jump on a plane. We're in the middle of a big storm here, so having to think about jumping on a plane and heading out anywhere right now would be a big pain. So thank you, Dan. So I worked in the legal field pretty much for my entire career. I worked on the administrative side for most of my career. I went to law school for a year and quickly decided after year one that it definitely was not for me, but continued to work there because the money was good and it was pretty flexible in terms of, you know, having a family and, you know, being able to do other things and not have to work entirely too hard and be stressed out. So I continued to work there. And a little bit backwards, in 2009, I invested in my first real estate investment. I was doing the traditional narrative of get married and buy a home. And my real estate agent encouraged us to buy a townhome. It was a 3.5 bedroom, 2.5 bath townhome. And she said, you know, if we buy this townhome, then you'll be able to offset your debt payments by renting out the other rooms. And so that was kind of my introduction into real estate investing, and kind of fell in love with that. You know, the idea of being able to live almost close to free in the Bay Area, and was kind of a mind-blowing concept for me. And so we got interested in buying more real estate between that time in 2009 and 2010. And then we started to exit those properties in 2014 and 2016. And I was looking for another investment. You know, we came into some capital and we were trying to figure out what the next move for us was going to be. And I looked into so many different things. I looked into flipping houses. I looked into buying single family rentals, doing Airbnb short-term rentals, which is pretty big here in the Bay Area. And just really finally was like, okay, the best, easiest thing that I could do is to buy a single family home out of state, which I think is where a lot of people start off, right? They think, okay, this is the avenue I'm going to start. I can buy, I can do this. I can take down one single family home. And so that's what I started doing. I kind of went on a rampage and I started buying, you know, single family homes and smaller duplexes. And at the end of the day, after all the work that I was doing, I was probably averaging about $200 to $500 per door. And between all of the work from, getting the loans and the insurance and, all of the rehabs and all of the work for $200 to $500 per door, and still having to manage the property managers and all of the crazy work I was having to do, I was like, this is crazy. This is going to take me forever to get to where I was trying to go, which is financial independence. I knew that that was what I wanted to use the capital that we had come into. I knew that's what I wanted to use it for, was to achieve financial independence. And so I said, this is going to take me way too long. And that's when I turned to multifamily. And I really wanted to get into multifamily as a way to scale my real estate investing business so that I could achieve financial independence as soon as possible. And so, really multifamily for me was a way to hedge things like occupancy and vacancy, right? I mean, with multifamily, with my single family homes, I could go from 100% income to 0% income overnight. And with multifamily, you could lose a few people, but you could still, have a pretty high occupancy, even if a couple of people moved out. That's one thing. There's a number of reasons that I got into multifamily, but that was probably the biggest thing. And then also to take the $200 to $500 per door and, take that on 200 to 500 units, you multiply that and you do the math, and you're obviously going to get there a lot faster if you do it that way. But as I started to move forward in multifamily, I realized, and my interest in multifamily, I realized that, there's a lot of pieces involved in getting into multifamily, from, building relationships with brokers, getting good loan terms, finding the deals, equity raising, managing your investors. There was just so much to do. And that's when I discovered the opportunity to be a passive investor in a multifamily deal. And I thought, this is incredible. I mean, I can get into the multifamily game. I can learn the ins and outs of apartment investing. I can decrease my risk to, investing in these deals by leveraging the experience and the relationships that other operators who have already done deals have in this space, all the while earning a great return on my investment. And so I thought, this is great. And so I made my first investment as a passive in 2016, and that kind of changed everything for me. And I knew that that was what I was going to do to help get me out of my W-2 job. And so I made that first investment in 2016. And then in 2017, I was offered the opportunity to partner up on the general partner side of deals and bring some equity to a deal with the same syndicator I had invested with as a passive. And so I did that first deal in 2017, and then I did my second deal at the end of 2017. And then I met my business partner at a real estate conference in February out at the Best Ever conference in Denver. And, I had met her, and she had just told me that she had quit her job, and she had 2 young kids at home. And I thought, and she was just getting started in equity raising. And I thought, if she can do this, I can do this too. And, I have 3 young kids at home, and I was so scared of leaving my job and leaving this, it's a good paying, secure job. I had been there for a number of years. And I thought, if she can do this, she's in a very similar position as me, then I can do it too. And so that weekend, I left the conference, and on Monday, I marched into my office and I told them I was quitting. And on March 9th, that was my last day. And I think, and then after I quit my job, a month later, I co-founded my company, Good Egg Investments, with my business partner. But at the time I had put in my notice, I had no idea that we were going to form a partnership and that I was actually going to go down that road. So, I think, the important piece to take away from that is that, sometimes you just have to get out there and do it and take a leap of faith. I had already done a couple of equity raises, so I kind of had my foot in the door already with, being on the GP on the active side. So that's kind of the long, short story of how I got from, quitting my job, starting my company, and, getting to where I'm at now.
Well, and each one of you have a unique story, which is why I like panels so much, is that everybody kind of has a different story and a different way that they got to where they are. I do have one question that's come in directed at Juan. So if you want to unmute your mic, Juan, the question is, how did you take down a 32 unit on your first deal? Did you have a mentor, or did you do it on your own?
That's a very good question. So I did not have a mentor. So for me, it was a lot of podcasts, a lot of books, a lot of networking. I network a ton, dude. It was a lot. So for me, it was just trying to educate myself as much as I could. And then I just, like Julie said, it just took a leap of faith, on the investment side. And I'm like, well, I've done it on the single family side. How hard can it be, really? Is people renting an apartment and just, overseeing it. And, it turned out to be a really good deal. And, I learned a ton out of it, but it wasn't as hard as it seems like it could be, So on that deal, I was looking to take it down myself. But I had some experience and some good relationship with a general contractor that had been doing some work on my single family homes. And so I told him about the deal. He's like, "Oh, I want in, man. This is a good deal. This is a good deal." I'm like, "Yeah, And so then we ended up working together on it. And he was the one that actually did all the physical labor work and all the rehab and upgrading or updating the units and all that. So it ended up being a good opportunity there. So
Great. Awesome. So the next question that I have on my list here is, I'm gonna just have you guys let me know who wants to answer. So we'll kind of open this in front of and into all of us here. So, did you have a financial reserve? Not do you recommend it, but you personally, did you have a financial reserve prior to the transition of you going from W-2 to getting into real estate full time? And was there a definite plan for making that transition?
I'll answer that one first. We've always had a decent savings in the bank for short-term savings and then investments. But the real thing that enabled me to be able to leave my job is that, I'm a mom of 3 kids. I have two 10-year-olds and a 12-year-old. I forget how old they are sometimes. And as a mom of young kids, sometimes your career goes a little bit ups and downs, right, Julie? That happens. And so in the course of that, from the time that we decided to have kids, actually, when I left my full-time job years ago to do my grad school internship, my husband and I decided to live off of one income forever. And he was making way less than me at that time. He was probably, I don't know how much less, but it was kind of scary for me to leave my job then. So I had already been through that. But what we decided was that if I ever did work, all of our income from my job would go towards saving, investments, kids' activities, which are expensive, and fun stuff like traveling around the world. And so because we had trained ourselves for the last 15 years, essentially, to be able to live that way, and we live in one of the most expensive cities in America. We live in Seattle. We're just super frugal. And so me leaving my job when I did, even though I was making a good salary, it was scary because, you get used to having that income coming in. But we had just been prepared because we had the mindset that we could do it and cut back things that we needed to cut back in order to be able to survive and thrive. And so it wasn't that daunting for us. But it's not like we had been saving for 5 years for me to be able to leave my job. It was that we just had that mindset in place.
That's a very good point. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Julie.
Oh no, go ahead, Juan. Go ahead.
Okay, so so you're right on, Tamar. I think the way I did it as well was my wife, she worked, she's a nurse, and then I was working at my W-2, and so we kind of split the expenses, so to speak. So she took care of most of the expenses, and what I did was for mine was more for savings. We don't. This is not ours. I'm working for free. Whatever. And so I just, it was like an automatic deposit into a savings account. That's the way I kind of did it. That was the mindset. And so we did that, but I also set aside some extra savings for our own activities and whatnot. But you're right on. That's the way I was able to do it. And so, to answer the original question, I did have a financial reserve. And so, I think you have to have something before you jump in or jump out, W-2, however you want to see it. But, I think, it's very important to have that.
Yeah, so I actually did it very much the same. My husband made enough money for us to live off of. And so when I was working, it was very much the same situation that, everything that I had made was just going into savings. And so it definitely made the decision to, to leave my job a lot easier, obviously, because we didn't really depend on my income and it was more just for savings. And very similar to what Tamar was saying, everything that we had was just going into a savings account to invest and to do fun stuff, right? It was just kind of like our extra money. So that helped. But to answer the question, did we have a financial reserve? Yes, we did. Going back to what I was saying before, we had, sold a couple of our properties here in the Bay Area. And so we had that cushion. So I had that, money to fall back on, one. And then, but two, and I think this is a really important part, is that I had looked at the passive investments that we were making as sort of my fallback. So I thought, if I do the GP side of these deals and I can't get into these deals and, I'm a flop and I can't make, I don't, apartment investing is not for me, then at least I had a cushion to fall back on as far as like the passive investment streams that were now coming in from the deals that we had invested into. So, was there a plan for, making that transition? The plan really was to continue to build as many passive income streams as we could. And then also whatever I could do on the GP side was just kind of like, the frosting, the cherry on top. And, so did I, was there a definite plan? I think at the end of the day, you can plan and you could say, okay, this is how I'm going to do it, but you have to, be flexible because things are going to happen that you weren't expecting to happen, both positive and negative, right? And I think that being flexible in how you face those obstacles and those challenges is really the key to, success there. So, yeah.
Awesome. So my approach was a very deliberate approach. It took me about 2.5 years working a corporate job that I specifically set out for that to be my last corporate job. And it was, which is really weird going to work because I didn't want to make friendships. I didn't tell anybody what I was doing. I basically just kind of went in the corner, did my work and left. So it was a very odd kind of isolated 2 years, but was willing to really pay any price to make it happen. My criteria was that there was some cash in the bank for a reserve, but really I needed my monthly cash flow from my assets to cover my bills, not double, triple my bills. I mean, I've been a sole provider for my family for many years, so it was 100% on me, which provides a tremendous amount of focus for you, as sole providers know. So I had some cash reserves, but more importantly, I wanted to meet all my bills. And that took a small multifamily, a 6-unit that I owned, and 14 or 15 single family rentals, all cash flowing, all with equity to cover my bills, and then some cash. And one thing I would mention to everybody that's watching is you want to have your own capital, but also very important is access to capital. So I lined up every line of credit I could get. I make sure I had all my debt lined up on my single family rentals. And I make sure I started to talk to more and more people about raising capital. I've been raising capital for years. I started with the single family raising debt, and that transitioned pretty seamlessly to raising equity on the multifamily side. But access to capital is very, very important. Not only to have your own little capital for your family, but if you can go out and build your network like we're all doing here to raise capital for deals, that's extremely valuable too.
We have some phenomenal questions that are coming in, questions that I didn't even think about, but I think there would be some, I'm going to switch over to one of these questions that came through because I think it's a question that a lot of people ask and are curious about. It comes in from Jamie Arnold. And the question is, can you give us some advice for having those quote unquote tough conversations with the spouse for when you want to say, I want to quit tomorrow and do this full time? I know each one of you probably had that conversation with your spouse. And any recommendations on how to deal with the insurance for the family if you happen to cover it, if you happen to be covered with your W-2? Who wants to touch on that one?
I'll touch on that real quick. The conversation, I don't think you should jump out and quit. I mean, for me, it was a multi-year process. Every single day I wanted to be out of my day job, but I'm a grown up. I have kids. I have responsibilities. I didn't have that luxury. So, having the conversation the first time might be tough, and you have it again in a week, and you have it again in a week, and you're talking about it every day over years. Be prepared to do that if you're starting from nothing like I was. I started with no capital and no knowledge, and it took a long time to build up. And so luckily my spouse has been on board, but she's seen it over the years. So it's more of a gradual thing. In terms of health insurance, that was the biggest thing I was concerned about leaving. Personally, for my family, we use something called Samaritan Ministries that's tied in with the church, but it's a fantastic program where you basically pay somebody else's bills every month. It's about $500 for my family of 5. And, every month we write a check, or my wife writes a check to somebody in Wichita that had a procedure. And then if we have any claims, people write us checks. That's the gist of it. There's more to it. But very scary step to not have that traditional health insurance. But we've been on it for 4 years now. We've loved it. I know that's a question that a lot of people have, that it's basically golden handcuffs, right? Your benefits from your employer. And if you want to strike out on your own, you need a plan to get over that.
Yeah, so I'll add to something too. When I first started talking to my husband about all of these great investments that I was making out of state, and I told him, hey, I just wired all this money to this person that I've never met to buy a house I've never seen. He thought I was a little bit crazy. But that was really the first step. And what started to happen was the money started to come into the bank account. And that was when I started to see his eyes open up and his interests start to come around to real estate. So I would say if there's a way, for you to add some kind of, value to your wife in the way of real estate investing, or your spouse, then I think that's really how you're going to start to pique their interest and maybe get them, on board. That's what I would say to that. And as far as health insurance, for us, my husband is still working right now, and so we have insurance under him. So unfortunately, I don't have any advice there for you.
I did not have any hard conversations. I don't have any good stories on that. Sorry, you guys. My husband has always been like the biggest cheerleader in my entire life. I've known him way over half my life. And he basically just says to me every other week, just let me know when I can retire, baby. So he trusts everything I'm doing. And we were in the single family business together, but the multifamily thing, it's not like he's in the business with me, but I talk to him about it all the time. And I always run by every deal that I'm working on and talk to him about my investors and the loans and all this kind of different stuff. But I never once had to have a conversation with him that was difficult, because he believes in me intrinsically, and he knows he trusts that what I'm doing is going to be beneficial to our family. So sorry, no dramatic story there.
So for me, I did get the support from my wife. She's a nurse, as I mentioned earlier, and it was a gradual thing. Like Devin said, it was something that it was like, hey, I want to do this. I want to do this. And, for her, she's like, okay, well, you gotta, get some assets, start, acquire some assets, and start going down that direction. Like that we have, something to fall back on, and so it was a gradual thing. But, towards the end, when it was getting closer, I was the one that was like, oh, wait, should I do it? Should I not do it? And she's like, no, you're doing it. So I think it's very important to have a supporting spouse, it's a scary thing. It's definitely scary. But we're just a small example of, of the number of people that have done it, so, you got to make sure you get the support for sure, and have it planned out, and things are not always going to go as planned, but you got to do your best. The other thing, as far as insurance, I was fortunate enough to, my wife, she's a nurse again, so, we're able to get her, our insurance through her W-2. So that's the way we handle that.
So the answer to the question is, if you don't have a spouse with insurance, then do what Devin has done and looking at the health share program. That's actually, Devin, what I do as well. So I actually use a different company, but I'm familiar with Samaritan's Ministries, and I know somebody asked them about what that was. Samaritan Ministries is the group. I use one called Liberty Health Share. So there's a couple of different programs that are out there, several different organizations, just making sure that you choose one that fits. I think a lot of them are just based on, different religious beliefs and stuff like that, but you just have to find one that fits you. And it does actually qualify, even though the mandate has been lifted from the ACA mandate for the insurance, these did actually qualify to not make you get taxed as well. So right. If you had one of these health share programs, it did allow you to do that. So next question. Man, I got lots of questions that have come in here. So let's do a rapid fire question here and just go through. We'll start with the original order with the original order we had with Juan, Tamar, Devin, and then Julie. So Juan, I'm going to start off with you. How many units gave you the freedom to stop the job route?
Yeah, so I had a 32 unit, then I had 4 homes, so I was at 36. And I just took the leap of faith after that.
Okay.
I only had 4 units when I left my job. I have 115 right now. In order to get my husband to retire, I think we need about another 150.
Awesome.
I had 14 or 15 single families and a 6-unit multifamily, and the cash flow every month covered my bills when I stepped out of my job.
Thank you.
I had 2 single family homes and a duplex, and I was invested as a passive investor in 2 multifamily deals.
And Julie, there's a question that's directed at you. So while you're on here with us, the Jonathan Child had asked, you had raised, he was like, this is a question. You raised capital to get on the GP for the first time, question mark.
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
All right. And let's see here. Devin, I have a question for you that came in. So did you sell your single family properties when you moved into the multifamily space?
Somewhat, yeah. I kind of traded them out strategically. Ones that I liked, I would hang on to. I mean, honestly, I love single family as an investment. It just doesn't scale. You know, it's a fantastic investment. We still buy them, but I've got a team now that kind of manages all that. So yeah, there was a lot of snowballing capital. You know, you buy one, you build some equity. A few years later, you sell it, and then you cobble together some money to you know, my first deal, my first multifamily I bought with no partners. It was a relatively small amount of capital, but then my next multifamily deal was $150,000 that I put in, and that came from selling a couple of single family houses, you know, and just keep trading up and trade those little green houses in for the red hotels, right? And you just keep moving.
So why would you sell the property when you can just refinance it and keep the property? That was the question that came through.
Okay, yeah, refi is always a great option, and usually I would buy, like we're talking about single family, buy it on the front end, refi out all your original money, and go rinse and repeat. And I've done plenty of that, but I would sell because I had enough. That was the way to extract the most equity. You know, I mean, if somebody would give me 100% LTV, I'd probably take it, but you know, you're not getting.
Not going to happen. It's not 2008 anymore.
Yeah, it's probably great that that's not happening, but you know, if you sell, that's how you're getting. You know, you milk the cow every month for a few years, but eventually you take it to slaughter. And you know, my rationale was as long as I was rolling that capital into a bigger, better things, then it was, you know, money well spent.
All right, so I'm going to open it up to whoever wants to start this next one. And the question comes from Malcolm Fan out of California. When you had a busy W-2 job, how did you make time and get away from your desk job to call brokers and hunt for deals?
Yeah, I'll take that one first. I am a mom of 3 kids. As I've mentioned before, they're all very young. There was a point that they were all 3 under 4. And I was also working, and I was commuting 2 to 3 hours a day to my job, and then going there and actually working for 8 hours. And so, you know, for me, a lot of it was, you know, making sure that you use your time very wisely. And so on my 2 to 3 hour commute every day, I would listen to podcasts. That's what I did. I was listening to podcasts about, you know, 40 hours every month. And I would, or take calls during that time. And then also on my lunch breaks, I would take calls, I would respond to emails. And then after I put my kids to bed, I would go back to it, and, you know, make phone calls or, you know, reply to emails or do research or read or whatever it was that I could. And then on weekends when I had time as well. So, I mean, I think, you know, at the end of the day, everyone only has 24 hours to do, you know, to work with. And so I think that, you know, when you're still working, you have to be very mindful about where you're putting your time, and making sure that you're using every single inch as, you know, efficiently as possible so that you can maximize the few hours that you do have outside of your job.
I 100% agree with you, Julie. I think use your mornings very effectively. I set my alarm for 4:45 every morning, and for the first hour of my day, I either research or I'm reading about something that's going to help me in my business. And then right after that, I go for an hour to hour and a half workout, and I either thinking through my business plans and being creative, or listening to podcasts. So that's another time. All my drive time is books on tape or podcasts. And then when I was working, it was weekends, and we'd bring our whole families along. At that time, our kids were, I think, 4, 4, and 6, and then, ranging up from that. But we would bring them along. They would be doing rehab projects with us. It was a family business. It still is a family business. And they had to buy into it because they had no other choice. So that was our family fun. And then evenings as well. Like last night I was working until like 9:30 at night, even though I was working on stuff all day as well. My kids were off at basketball, and I was working when I had a break because they're gone. So and I also don't watch TV. I probably legitimately watch 2 hours of TV a month. That's it. I don't watch the news. I don't care what's going on. I'm going to hear about it from somebody else because I want to fill my mind with the things that really, really, really matter to me, which is looking at my goals, reading my goals, writing my goals every day, saying them out loud, and then letting my brain go to the place where I can get to that place, like letting my brain be creative in a quiet space when I have quiet spaces. So if you're working, that's during your lunch break, evening hours, morning, that's going to be probably the best time to do it.
Yeah, so very, very good points from both of you. I would say for me it's very similar as well. In the mornings, what I would do is hit the computer, hit the emails, and respond to as many as I could. Get to work. I'm at work, and any break that you could get, you're taking advantage of it, and you're using it wisely. You're not just burning time. Lunch break as well. But as I mentioned earlier, I was, a technician. I worked on cars. I worked on BMWs. So every single time, that requires driving as well. Talking to customers up front, being all over the place, but at the same time driving. So every single time that I had the opportunity to drive, guess what? I was on a phone call. I was doing something, and so, I think, like you guys mentioned, you have to maximize every single opportunity because, like Tamar mentioned, you only have 24 hours in a day. Everybody has the same amount of time. And you just cannot make excuses. If it's not that important, what you have to do at that moment, then take care of what is more important for yourself and for your family. So when you're at home, you later on in the evening when the kids are at bed, then get back to it. You have to make sacrifices, to be able to get to that point. And that's the name of the game. You have to sacrifice something. It's not free. It's not given to anyone. You have to go out there and take it.
Yeah, definitely noticing a pattern here amongst everybody that you have to trim all the fat from your schedule. I think a lot of people just don't have goals, period. So it's easy to fall into a routine. Obviously, we all have goals, and it's easy to start trimming some of the fat from your schedule. TV is an obvious one. I think it's really important for anyone watching that wants to make the leap from W-2 to full-time that one of the things that really helped me early on was making an absolute 100% commitment that I was going to do absolutely anything that was legal and ethical to make it happen. And so, fortunately, I'd had an experience before going through Dave Ramsey's program of paying off all your debt. And so we sold cars. I took side jobs. We did anything to pay off our debt. And so I had gone through that. And my wife and I said, well, we did that. That was pretty intense. I think we can do this too. But for 2.5 years, it was for me, it was absolutely burning the candle at both ends. And it looks almost kind of crazy looking back on it, but that's what allowed you to jump, or me to jump. And I think you have to think of it like this, a W-2 has this massive inertia and gravity that's going to keep you there. It's gravity about what people are going to say about you. It's gravity about your own habits. It's gravity of having health insurance, having a paycheck. All that stuff is gravity that's going to keep you there. And if you're going to lift off and get out of that orbit, it's going to take a tremendous amount of force in the beginning. So you have to just be 100% committed to it. And I think it starts with that commitment, and then you start finding stuff. You start finding money. You start finding time. You start finding ways to make your plan happen. In terms of multifamily too, I would recommend if you're trying to do this, you're trying to talk to brokers and get deals done, I would recommend outsourcing your underwriting. To me, that's one thing that if we found a partner that does tremendous underwriting for a very reasonable cost, and it's such a For me personally, it just energy draining, time suck, all that stuff. So if you're working W-2 and you want to go sponsor a deal, I would find somebody to take care of your underwriting for you. You know, you're gonna have to pay them or partner them, but get that off your plate and then start finding other things that you can get off your plate personally, and really start dialing down on what is your superpower and what is your skill that you can focus on. Maybe that's raising capital, maybe it's marketing, maybe you're doing the underwriting, maybe that's your superpower and you could partner with somebody, but start identifying your highest skill and double down on it.
Well, with the running theme that you had pointed out, Devin, of, you know, really being able to make sacrifices where sacrifices need to be made and work extra long hours to get to that point. I want to turn it over to you guys and have you guys, you know, just chime in when you want to chime in about what is your why. What was your motivation behind? Because to just say you do that is great, but there's got to be a pushing driver. There's got to be some sort of why behind that. Otherwise, a lot of times you'll lose the mark. So share with us what your why was that kept you motivated and kept your eye on the prize, if you will.
The easy one for me is my wife and kids, right? I have a family. You know, I've been married 10 years. I have 3 kids. It's very easy to say, and that's kind of the quick shoot from the hip one that I give to everybody. Oh, my family. I love my family. I want to be a provider. But the truth is, I grew up with nothing, and then I got transferred to a high school with a lot of wealthy people, and that never went away from me. It never, ever went away. And I've always had it in my gut that I was going to show everybody. And so, you know, we own over 1,000 doors now, and it's like there, you know. It dawned on me a few years ago as I was like, actually met somebody from high school that I hadn't seen in years and years and years, and was telling him about what I was doing. And he was like, oh my God, dude, I cannot believe your company's doing that. And that was a turning point for, he doesn't know it, but it was a turning point for me. And I said, wow, I did it. I showed them all. Nobody cares. But I was like, geez, all this time, all that fire in my belly was to show everybody that could do it. So that was really it for me. And then of course, you know, now it's freedom. It's vacations for my family. It's the fun of the business and all that stuff. But it was, you know, it was a passion to show everybody. That might sound petty, but it was motivating.
That's awesome. I love that story. That's so, I love that you're truthful with that, because I think a lot of people do say, oh, it's my family or my kids. But I think, yeah, and for me, that is my answer. For me, it is about my family and my kids. I'll share kind of a personal story with you guys. In 2015, I was pregnant with my 3rd and my last child. And I was told about a little after my first trimester that my son might have some kind of a kidney issue and that he may not make it after delivery. And so we did a bunch of tests to see if that was the case. And it turned out that it wasn't. And I was so relieved in a way that, you know, I think only parents can really understand. But after that, they said, okay, well, if the problem isn't with him because of these really high test results, then the problem must be with you. And I literally spent a whole weekend thinking, they told me that I might have some kind of a cancer. And I literally spent the whole weekend thinking to myself that, you know, I may never see my kids grow up. And that was really, really hard for me to think about. And I think, you know, if there's anything that, you know, it would be really hard for me is to think about never being able to see my children grow up and to be with them and be by their side. And you know, I went in for further testing the week following, and then, you know, things ended up looking okay. And I delivered my son, and he's now 3.5 years old, and he's totally healthy. And I'm standing here talking to you great people. So I'm obviously fine as well. But it was in that time, in that little, you know, weekend that I had to really think and reflect about, you know, what was really important to me. At the end of the day, what really mattered, you know, it wasn't money. It was more time, that I wanted more time here, you know, with my kids. And so that was my why. And so for me, that pushed me so hard, because at the end of the day, you know, you just never know when your last day is here. You know, we all think that retirement is some place that we will all eventually make it to, but the truth is that that's not guaranteed, and that may never happen. And I didn't want to work another 25, 30 years at this job and expect to live another 30 years after that and enjoy, all the hard work I had done, in my career. And so I knew that I had to do it, make a change, and I had to do it now. And so for me, that was my why, and obviously pretty powerful. And I think, to Devin's point, you really have to be committed, and I think once you make that commitment, you'll start to see that other things will start to fall into place that you hadn't even thought about before. But I think that commitment is big, and making that decision to commit. So I think understanding, your why is can be very powerful for getting you from, where you are today to where you want to be.
Piggyback off of that, I think I have a lot of whys, and listening to you guys makes me think through them, because sometimes you don't revisit them as you're going, and at heart, I am a super adventurer. I love doing all things crazy, like skydiving and backpacking and surfing and boogie boarding and traveling around the world. And when you have constraints on your time and constraints on your income, it can be difficult to do all of those things. I always made ways to do it, but at heart, I'm an adventurer, and I love going after all the biggest dreams that I could ever want to go after. I also have been a hyperachiever since I was born, essentially. And so for me, being professionally driven, I find myself always reining myself back more than just because if I were to really unleash myself, I don't even know where I'd be. It would be insane. But being a professional role model to my daughter and to my sons is really, really important to me. It's I just can't even understate or overstate that, how important it is to show that a mom can be a great mom. I also homeschool a couple of my kids, and I just really love having time with them. So it might sound cliche that your family's your why, but really, if I don't have them, I don't have anybody that really matters. They are my heart and my soul. And so it's being able to do all the adventures and traveling with them, and building a dream home in Hawaii that we can go visit together, and things like that you can't necessarily do when you have a standard W-2 job. I feel like there was something else I wanted to say, but I'm forgetting right now. So I'm going to pass it on to Juan.
Hey, everybody. So for me, it all starts at the very beginning. It started at the very beginning with my dad. Growing up, I have 4 sisters and 1 brother. So it was a big family. So my mom, she stayed at home. She was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was the one that worked and brought the bacon, so to speak. So he would go to work, and when he would come back home, he would go to work. So he was a welder. So I come from a real blue collar background. There's nothing flashy or anything like that, for me. So he would go to work, he'd come home, and he had his own little side biz that he would do at home, and building trailers. And that's why we started learning how to build trailers at 11, 12 years old. We're welding and selling these things, and that was what we did. That was a family business. But also, what I never received from my dad was I never received that time for us. It was all about business and work, and that's everything, business and work. And so he never to this day even said, hey, I'm older now, but he never did even pick up a ball to go, hey, let's go play some ball. This is what you love to do. I love sports. This is what you love to do. Let's go out there for a little bit just for you. Never. So he's one of those old school real dry guys, and so for me and my W-2, that's what I found myself doing. Go to work, come home late, my kids are in bed, go to work, come home the weekends, I'm tired, I don't really want to, I don't have the energy to play. And so one of those things that's you don't want to fall into the same footsteps that my dad went and did with us, and it sucks, and so I was like, what, I'm going to change it. I want to be there for my kids. I want them to always have good memories of me, being there and spending time with them. So that's really one of the main drivers for me. Apart from that, like I said, I was a technician. That's not one of these, prestigious kind of jobs that, my dad, he's a BMW technician. So it was also a personal thing to have something to where, my kids can be proud of their dad, So I think it's a combination of those two things that kind of drove me and just wanted to, provide the best for my family is kind of what it is,
So another question that I have that I want to ask you is, with the slowdown that's, where everybody's talking about, or the contracting of, or the contraction of the market that might be coming up soon. I say might because we never know. We've been talking about it since 2015, and we just keep talking about it, waiting for it. So there's definitely some indicators, lately that are, things are moving and stuff. But with that possible slowdown coming up, do you think now is a good time to be, considering, jumping into this space to possibly make this type of a transition?
I would answer. I'll go ahead and answer that question. I was at a conference yesterday. So Mark Dotzauer was one of the speakers there. He's a real known economist out there, especially here in Texas. So it was here in Houston where I live, and so a lot of heavy hitters in that conference. Just from brokers to lenders to you name it. And so what he was saying was pretty much the long story is that the way that he described it is we're on a plane and we're at 30,000 feet and there's no plans for it to descend. There's no plans for it to crash. It's going to keep going and it's going at full speed. And so if you look back, 10 years from now, if you look back, to today, you're going to wish you would have gotten in. And, if you do it, then, there's opportunity out there. So I think it's a good time if you're prepared. Don't do it cold turkey. If you haven't planned for it, if you've been planning for it for a while and you feel like you may be ready, then go for it. Otherwise, you need to still plan for it. Don't just quit, out of nowhere either. So that's kind of what I would say. Right now it's according to him, it's still a good time, and we're looking at deals. We're submitting offers, and we're going to continue to buy in 2019. So it's a good time, especially in Texas.
At the last height of the recession in 2008, I heard a stat that only 4% of foreclosures were multifamily, and I'm probably wrong a little bit, but I remember that sticking out to me. Most of the foreclosures were in the single family housing market because, as one of us mentioned earlier, I can't remember who, but multifamily can weather storms a lot easier than single family housing. If you have your single family house, your tenant leave, you have no income. You're paying the mortgage and all the expenses all by yourself. But if you have multifamily, if you have a 50-door property and it's even 10% vacant or 20% vacant, it might be tight, but you're still going to be able to pay your mortgage payments and the expenses associated with it. You might not have cash flow. You might not be able to reinvest as much into the property to improve it, but you're still going to meet your debt obligations. And so I think that any time is a good time to do it. And I just think people have a way of making excuses whenever they want to make excuses to not do something, or justifying why they shouldn't do something. If you are smart and you are conservative, and I think the word conservative is flown around all the time and it's so overused, but it is really true. You have to be careful with how you are looking at deals. My husband and I always had criteria for buying single family houses, and it was very strict. And if it was even a little bit over the line, and it didn't meet that criteria by 0.5 percentage point or whatever the metrics was, we wouldn't do it. So you have to be very clear and concise. And if you're not good at underwriting, then to Devin's point, hire somebody else that is good at underwriting, or bring that person onto your team and be really strict with that criteria, because you can find deals in any market.
Yeah, I want to add to that, I think that right now may not be the best time to get into doing deals on your own as a newbie. But I think that a great way to get into apartment investing is to leverage your expertise with somebody else's expertise and partner up with someone, find a way to add value to someone else who maybe has a good foothold in a particular market that you are interested in, and find a way to add value to them, and basically leverage their experience and their knowledge in that particular market and in that space. And work with them. I don't know that it's such a good time right now to try to get out there and do a deal on your own, but that's me. That's my opinion. I'm a big proponent of partnerships and leveraging other people's access to good deals and opportunities, and me finding a way that I can add value to their deals. And so I think that partnerships can be very powerful, especially in a time like this where we are right now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally second that, Julie. The multifamily, especially if you're talking about 100 plus units, I mean, it's a team sport and there's a place to get in. I think people have this mistaken concept that, I've got a W-2 job, I'm making six figures, and I'm going to go out and run a 300 unit property. It doesn't happen like that. It's steps, or you are in a partnership of a 300 unit property, but it's process. And then, fortunately, there's ways to break up the partnership and split up responsibilities so that you can get involved, but not overnight. So to the question of where we are in the market cycle, super popular question. I think it's always the right time to buy the right deal. And I hear a lot of macroeconomic conversations, and of course I'm tuned into those, but at the same time, look, I want to know what San Antonio's rent growth is doing, but it's an aggregation of data. Really, I just need to buy one property that hits my metrics, and I need to execute our business plan on it and have, the underwriting make sense and have pockets of conservative metrics baked in, whether it's vacancy or whether it's budget overruns or the rehab's going to take longer. As long as all that's baked in there, I feel pretty good about it. And, I only invest in Central Texas, so this is specific to my situation, but we're stepping in front of a demographic and population train right now that it shows no signs of slowing in terms of net positive migration to San Antonio, to Central Texas, to Texas in general, where, you've heard people say it over and over again, but my company's investing in B and C class assets. All anybody's ever built in the last 20 years is Class A luxury stuff that's renting for $1.40 a square foot. Those guys are going to get hammered when the economy turns, right? So we don't play in that space. And if you're a developer and you build, fill, and sell it, and that's how you make your money, that's great. But that's a scary place to be when the music stops. Where we're playing is we're serving a fundamental need of providing housing to folks that are making the median income or around it. That need is not going away. So is it bulletproof? Is it 100% fail safe for the rest of the time? No, it's not. Our cap rates compressed? Absolutely. Our deals hard to find? Absolutely. It just means you need to recalibrate your expectations on what it's going to take. I think the problem is, 5 years ago, if you could have done this, it would have been great. But, if I could have gone 20 years ago and bought up everything in San Antonio that I know is amazing now, it's hindsight. You can't play that hindsight game. You have to buy what makes sense right now. And it's always on a per deal basis. Does the deal make sense? And then, of course, if you can get into long-term fixed debt to ride anything out, that's, of course, always a solid idea.
So another question here along the kind of tagging on the why question and kind of diving a little bit deeper here. Now that you have kind of got to the point of being in this full-time real estate investor, full-time multifamily investor, position, and you've accomplished that point of the why. Obviously, the why continues to still drive you to stay and do what you're currently doing. But now that you're here, are there other things that continue to motivate you and that you have been able to make an impact on other people, like, causes that you've been able to help, or, donations or anything like that, or just something that you really believe in that you can be able to now help others where you weren't able to do it before?
Yeah, I mean, for me, absolutely. That's like one of the things that excites me so much about what I get to do, every single day I get up and I get to, have this huge impact on so many different people within, the apartment investing space, everyone from, the tenants that live at these apartment communities that we're buying, our investors. For me, that's so powerful. That's one of the big reasons why I even started my company, was to be able to help these investors get into these solid deals and earn a passive income so that they could focus on doing other things that they loved. Particularly with mothers, as a mom, we're so busy with so many different things. Mothers, I feel like, and no offense to the guys here on the call, but I feel like mothers are really the ones that hold the glue together in the house. We do so much. We, think about the birthday parties and, education and the fun stuff. And we have so much going on in addition to trying to have a career. And so to be able to watch our investors' lives change one investor at a time by helping them get into these deals and building passive income streams is so powerful for me. And it's something that I wasn't sure if it was going to take off, but it has. And it's so exciting for me to be able to work with so many people and have that positive impact. And then lastly, you know, to be able to be at speaking events like this, where I'm able to share my insight to folks, to my colleagues within the industry, and then also with other folks who are trying to get into the business, you know, to be able to add that value is great. And you know, again, that's something that I wasn't really able to foresee or predict that was going to happen when I made the decision to quit my job. But here I am, and you know, so there's all kinds of things that are going to happen, I think, after you commit and you make that decision to move forward. But yeah, absolutely. I love what I get to do every day. It's super exciting and powerful.
I tend to think about impact in a little bit different way. I never really have huge initiatives of something that I want to fix or donate to, except Washington Trails Association, because I love the forest. So if I can give more money to them, that's great. But I really think about, instead of on a macro level, on very focused, impacting one life at a time. And I think we all underestimate that. It's kind of like if you grew up in the church and people are like, you need to go and do a missionary mission over in Guatemala. Well, you don't have to go to Guatemala to impact people's lives. You can impact them in your house, in your community, anywhere. And so I think about that every single time that I sit down and have a meeting with somebody. And that's the way I view it. It's like, how can I have these little impacts every day on the people that I'm talking to on the phone, in these types of environments, over coffee and lunch and breakfast and cocktails and at networking events. And I view every conversation as the ability to make a difference. And I will say that in not working a W-2 job, my ability to do that is so much greater because my schedule is my schedule. And I find that to be a very rewarding thing.
Yeah. So for me, it's, you know, I'm part of a church, and so I, you know, have always given. And so it gives, you know, that's one of the things that drives me is, you know, always give back, you know, to them, and to use it, you know, worldwide, because they're in so many different things going on, you know, throughout the world, and helping others through, you know, child trafficking and, you know, around the world. So it's awesome. But, you know, yes, as far as on a personal level with others, you know, like you guys have already mentioned, you know, just the ability to help others, help them get to their financial goal, you know, faster, you know. So that's something that I really enjoy, just the excitement that I get from them. But also, you know, apart from that, you know, just the guys that are looking to get into the biz, not necessarily as passive investors, but as active guys, you know, the guys that have reached out to me, and, you know, I've met up with them, you know, talked to them over the phone, you name it. And, you know, just to be able to give them, you know, different tips or different, you know, pieces of advice. I mean, you know, for me, you know, I wish I would have had that, you know, even, you know, starting out, I wish I would have had somebody to just to talk or, you know, give a quick phone call to. But, you know, those kind of things, you know, I think those go a long way. You know, you're able to help somebody out and just see them grow on their own, you know, because I think for most of us here, I would say that the majority of us are looking to do this on a more active level, rather than passively, maybe. So I think that, you know, anything I can do to help, you know, it's, you know, I'm there to help you guys out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Juan there that, you know, we do a couple of different things in terms of giving to the church, and that's great, but you don't necessarily see that impact. I've done some stuff where, you know, we sponsor some children in the Philippines where they have a cleft palate, you know, a really, really messed up grill, I guess, and they fix it, and you can sponsor like 50 kids for this life-changing surgery. And that really, man, that really gets to me to see that impact. But I guess the most impactful thing for me personally is helping capable people to grow. And this has been the coolest thing to see. You know, my business partner, my single family business, we're very active still. And he's a young guy and he's got this tremendous opportunity. And to see him grow over the last couple of years, there's been amazing. And it's super rewarding because our paths crossed that's happened. And so same thing with investors, to Julie's point. You know, people have such a garbage financial education, and even, you know, really smart people that have great careers, they just have their head down and they've been working, and they look up and they're in their 50s and they're going, well, I just put it all in the market, right? And you're like, man, you know, it's such a garbage mantra of just hand your money over to somebody for as long as possible and don't ask questions. And that's the de facto standard that a lot of people think about investing. And so to show somebody this vehicle, I mean, one of my investors and a close friend of mine, you know, literally had $1 million CDs, right? And so to go, hey man, we can do a lot better than that. And they're a little hesitant, and then start making people, you know, you start making your investors millions of dollars. It's the most rewarding thing. So that's not a classic charitable thing on the way that, you know, surgery for kids in the Philippines is, but it's super rewarding. And I think anybody that's in the business for the long term realizes that we have a tremendous ability to be impactful just by being a good business owner. You know, we're hiring people. You know, I don't know how much we spent, millions of dollars last year. My company spent hiring plumbers, electricians, roofers, sheetrockers. I mean, those guys are feeding their families in San Antonio with funds we cut for our projects. So that's not charity per se, but it's definitely economic stimulus. And so I think for us, it's all those things, right? True kind of charity and giving money away, but also being impactful through the business to, you know, everybody here mentioned that. And I totally agree.
So we're out of time for any more questions from the people that are listening and watching, but I do have one last thing that I want you guys to do in these last 4 minutes that we have left. Is I want you to share one piece of parting advice, if you will, for those who may be still in their W-2 job and they're looking to make this transition like you did. What is one piece of advice that you would give somebody that is considering making this type of change?
I guess I'll go ahead and get started on that. I would say, you know, well, there's actually a couple, you know, that I have. I would say if you are looking to do this actively, to build a database of possible investors before you jump in. You know, I think that's huge, because if you jump in and you don't have anybody to go to, then you're gonna be stuck for a while. So I would say you start building that up, you know, and try to get the interest of people that you work with, you know, and just keep working on that. Keep working. You're never gonna stop working on that. But the other thing that's also very, very important is to build a team. You know, if you're gonna do this, you know, day one, you know, once you leave your job, you're going to be focusing on multifamily. You got to have a team, you know, and if you don't have a team, then you're going to be riding solo, and it's going to be very, very tough for you. So I would say those two things: build a database and build a team before you jump in or jump out, whatever. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I think number one, you need to make a decision. And not decide that you're going to dabble in something, but decide that this is the course that you want to take. And once you make that decision and you've convinced yourself that you're sticking with it, go for it with everything that you have. And one trick that I think is helpful for some people as well is to set an end date. Like, set that I'm not going back after this. Is the very longest that I can go at my job. So maybe that is two years, maybe it's a year and a half, maybe it's 3 years or 5 years. But if you have a very specific date in mind and you repeat that date to yourself and you have it listed on a wall and say, this is when I'm going to achieve those goals by, that's also a very helpful thing. And talking to everybody you know about that decision that you made. So being confident about that decision and sharing it with brokers, like Juan said, everybody, just talk to people and let them know that this is your path.
Yeah, and I'll go next. I would say one of the things that really helped me, and I think I mentioned this earlier, was having those passive income streams built up, a few of them before I left. You know, I think if you can, you know, learn to earn your money, save, be frugal. I think Tamar mentioned that. And then invest, and then just repeat that: earn, save, invest, earn, save, invest, and build up a couple of passive income streams before you actually make that, jump to quit. That way you're not, once you quit, you're not going from, 100% income to 0% income. Maybe it's 50% income. And, while you're doing that, start to research, real estate investing, different things that you might be interested in. I think Devin mentioned that earlier, like find out where, you'll be able to add that value, and then have that idea in your mind that that's the direction you're going to go. And like Tamar said, commit, and then go for it. And once you make that commitment to do it, things are going to start to fall into place that you weren't expecting, like I mentioned before. And I think that's such a big thing to keep in mind, is that you can plan all you want, but at the end of the day, things are going to start to happen that are sort of out of your control, that you didn't even anticipate. So you have to be able to be open-minded and willing to take a little bit of a risk, but still secure yourself with some of that passive income, so you're not just jumping out into the open with no income coming in. So yeah.
I think the biggest thing you can do is go to events. So kudos to all of you here that are at this event, but that's going to do two things. Relationships are everything. So it's going to give you relationships. And two, there's something very weird that happens. We're social animals, and it's monkey see, monkey do. And if you get around a room full of people, you go, that person's kind of like me, and it's going to change you. And this whole thing is really kind of a confidence perception game. I mean, the mechanics of it aren't that difficult, but events are going to give you perspective and confidence to take the next step. And they're also going to give you those relationships. That would be the number one takeaway that I would suggest.
Well, I want to take the last, actually, we're about a minute over, so I'll take 30 seconds. How about that? And just thank each one of you for taking your time to be here. I know you sacrificed to be here with me and with everybody else that's watching today. Thank you for your advice. Thank you for your knowledge. It's been very helpful, very impactful. If you're listening and you're watching and you appreciate them, just go ahead and go to your chat box and just say yes, 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 so they know you're there and know you're watching. And thank you guys so much for paying attention to us, but also thank you guys for sharing with us. And I think that was a great panel. What'd you guys think?
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you so much, Dan.
I'm just glad it went off without a hitch. I was getting worried there at the end when Devin dropped off. I'm like, oh, great. Wait a minute. But then he came back on. So I figured maybe he was picking his nose or something.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Thanks a lot, Dan.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you. All right. Bye.